Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, June 12th, 2019. Time for another show. I have, in fact, the entire script of the show written out here on this piece of paper, which I refuse to show you, but I do have folded up in my pocket. And I will now stand so that the sunlight streams straight through it, and you can see that it's blank. Big mystery, still looming today, about whether or not there is any sort of secret agreement with Mexico. I don't know. We probably will spend zero time on it, but I actually saw several pictures of what purported to be, I guess, pictures of Donald Trump holding up that mysterious piece of paper, some of which make it look entirely blank, and some of which apparently appear to reveal a considerable amount of text, but not a whole lot. It's a one-pager. And as secret agreements go, one-pagers don't typically hold a whole lot of import. But now I need to settle the question, I guess, in my own mind about whether or not that thing was blank. Of course, Donald Trump does have a long history of heading out in front of the press, waving around blank papers, insisting that they are, in fact, important documents. You'll recall, of course, the time he came out to announce that he was divesting from all his businesses, and to prove it, there was a stack of freshly unpackaged blank pages, binder clipped together and stuffed into manila folders and stacked up for no one to get a chance to look at. There was, of course, the picture of him pondering his, I think it was his first address to the joint session of Congress, the non-State of the Union address, that he was sitting at the receptionist desk in the lobby of Mar-a-Lago, just sort of looking like a wax figure and pondering what he would put down on the blank piece of paper in front of him. There was a photo op that was staged with him signing what appeared to be one of a stack of bills and resolutions and whatnot that had been sent, I guess not resolutions, but had been sent over from the Congress, but the one in front of him was blank. And then yesterday waving around this piece of paper that purported to be a secret agreement, and I'm not going to show you. And apparently that's another thing, too. He loves to tout that he has gotten secret letters, agreements, and dispatches from people around the world that he refuses to show the press, but he likes to tease them with it. Oh, would you like to see what's in this? Oh, boy, would you like to see this? But I'm not going to show you. I'm not even going to tell you what's in it because it's private and secret and totally amazing or whatever. Well, you know. Yet no one seems to have gotten the picture in the press, or I guess everybody has, but no one will say it. I don't know. It's just another one of those weird situations. No one will call them out on. I watched the gaggle in the White House driveway the other day, or you guys, it was yesterday, and I was sort of amazed by how it went in terms of. It was a good glimpse into what it's like to actually be there, I guess. And sort of disappointing in that he's telling everybody this is a secret document from Mexico, etc. But everybody's busy shouting their own dumb questions, and I guess you could question the value of a free press when they spend their time there. I mean, he has waved this thing around, and even if it didn't look blank at the time, a few people, of course, asked to see it, and he refused to show them. So you weren't going to get anywhere with that. But then you spend your time shouting out, Mr. President, what do you think of Joe Biden? And so it's like sending Stuttering John to do interviews from the Howard Stern show, just calling out, what do you think of whatever? What do you think of Joe Biden? And doesn't want to, address that one, although he's usually happy to do something like that. But all you're going to get out of it is he's going to say, I think he's a low IQ individual or whatever. And Mr. President, what about blah, blah? I don't know. It just seems so dumb, as opposed to the opportunity for the press to react as one, as he waves this paper around, that they should laugh in his face and say it's a secret document. Okay, sure. Got to tell you, Mr. President, it looks blank from here. Are you sure there's even writing on it? And you know how reluctant he is to wave around documents with writing on it, of course. I mean, on the one hand, he has pretended to have secret letters before, and of course, he's not inclined to wave around his tax documents. He has been hiding those documents and any number of other documents subpoenaed by members of Congress, but I'm just thinking about the time he spends waving around signed proclamations or signed bills from Congress. He loves to show everybody that he's signed these things, and yet he won't show this one document. Or even, not even let it out there for inspection, but just waving it around. Although I guess now you wave a document as president, somebody's going to be able to snap a picture of it, and then we'll blow up the picture and see what's on it. And so I guess it wouldn't be a secret after that. To the extent that it matters that it's secret, I guess that would be self-defeating. Not that he keeps any secrets either. I did notice him yesterday, I guess by way of defense of Kim Jong-un's possible murder of various North Korean officials and or his own relatives. Did he blurt out that he heard something about how his half-brother, who may or may not have been killed by the regime, was possibly a CIA asset? I think you're not supposed to say things like that out loud. Another one of those dangers we envisioned with giving him access to classified information. But, whatever. He's the president, purportedly, and so I guess we have to put up with it. All right, let's see. Here comes Greg Dworkin with a large raft of stories. It's been some time since we've had you on the air, since we had an extended weekend. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, how did graduation go?
Pretty good. They all had their names called, and nobody fell down or anything like that.
They used the correct hand to shake and the correct hand to reach for the diploma?
It appears, there were a few slip-ups.
Was there an actual diploma or just a rolled up piece of paper?
It was a secret Mexican agreement they gave them all, which was amazing because it's a huge breach of protocol. They actually did give them just empty diploma covers for whatever reason, and then you were to go and report to the principal's office one more time before they let you out, and give them your name, and they would hand you the diploma. Came in a manila envelope with various trinkets along with it, but I don't know, they wanted to hand everybody the covers for whatever reason. So no rolled up scroll, but just as well because it's harder to frame it if you do that.
So let's talk a little process while we mix some politics in. Okay, so there's this Democratic primary going on.
Yes.
And the leader in that primary at the moment happens to be one Joe Biden. And I don't know if you heard this. Stop me if you've heard this. But some issues about the Hyde Amendment came up.
Yes, they should hide those.
Now, as I read Twitter and the Internet, it appears that the last president that actually opposed getting rid of the Hyde Amendment was Jimmy Carter.
Opposed getting rid of the Hyde Amendment?
Yeah, I mean, Democratic pretional candidates have always said, I don't like the Hyde Amendment. We should do something about it.
Less Democratic president. Okay, yeah. Okay. All right.
So Biden now is just in line with everybody else. Nothing radical about what he's saying.
No, I don't. There isn't.
What are you going to do about it is, of course, the mantra that we all say. We say that to Republicans all the time.
What are you going to do?
So this issue of the Hyde Amendment comes up. And as it happens, the House, which is actually a functioning body in the Congress as opposed to the other one, passes bills, goes through committee, does the work, regular order, as John McCain liked to say.
Right.
And one of the things that comes up is appropriations and spending packages.
Usually.
So this is the opportunity to get rid of the Hyde Amendment.
Yes.
So they bring it up in the Rules Committee, chaired by Representative McGovern from Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And Ayanna Pressley offers an amendment to strike the Hyde Amendment prohibiting use of federal funds for abortions.
Okay.
And the committee chair says we can't do that because it's against the rules.
The chairman of the Rules Committee says this.
So they don't. Okay, and the part that I found fascinating is I was reading this, and I can't find the thread that explains this. I think it was John Hudak from Brookings, but some expert who knows a lot more about this than I do said, this is, of course, all politics, because here's how it works. There are specific things about amendments that basically say that you can or can't add this, or you can or you can't debate it. But if the Rules Committee chair wanted to, they just pass a rule that says that particular amendment, is not debatable. or that particular amendment doesn't come under the rules. We suspend the rules for that particular amendment, or any one of, hundreds of other parliamentary tricks you can use if you want that done.
Yeah.
If you don't want it done, then you just say, I'm sorry, it's against the rules. Next question. And that's basically what happened yesterday, in short.
Well, that ought to be fun and interesting.
So I got to find that whole thread because it was really interesting in terms of, look, this is how it works. Just about everything that they do is probably going to be against House rules because everything that you consider probably has some nuance here or there. But there are ways around it. You suspend the rules in order to get stuff done.
Yeah, right.
And when you decide not to suspend the rules, that's a political decision, not a rules thing.
Yes. Well, I mean, it may very well. It probably ends up.
So we're
coming
not suspending
down
the
to
rules for you because I don't want this to pass because whatever.
Yeah.
And thank you for your amendment that's bringing up a hot button topic right now that I don't really feel like dealing with. And I'm the chair, so thanks. Bye.
Yeah. Well, that'll be interesting as pressure rises for that one, and it's probably a pretty.
But that's
close...
in fact what happened. Ayanna Pressley's amendment was not approved.
I'll have to figure out. Well, I'll take a look and see what exactly the situation was. But yeah, the pressure will rise, and I mean, it may be that he thinks or has gotten instructions that, well, as much as we'd like to get rid of repeal the Hyde Amendment, which is no longer an amendment, the Senate, for instance, will it pass? Will they pass our appropriations bills, or will we be locked in a battle with them over this that will lead to a shutdown, leading into an election year once again? And I mean, that's entirely possible, but that would be a pretty close parallel to the decision to tamp down on impeachment talk. Well, we think it will be a political loser and won't lead to anything, and so therefore we won't do it. But you would have stepped in another trap on that one.
Right. So, maybe we're back on the show tomorrow.
Yeah, maybe.
So I'll try and find that. It was one of those interesting things.
Yes.
Since we're talking about history, before we get to the horrible polling about Donald Trump, let's look at a different sort of historical question here. This is from historian Heather Cox Richardson. And as you may know, this all started because Dinesh D'Souza is an idiot, and he likes to challenge an actual historian, Kevin Cruz, about facts that D'Souza usually gets wrong, and Cruz says, okay, here we go again. Yeah. Let me lay out step by step why you're wrong. This particular one happened when D'Souza challenged Cruz and anybody else. Show me one Republican who ever owned slaves.
Okay.
There were multiple examples.
Yeah.
But Heather Cox Richardson says, there seems to be some surprise that Republicans in 1860 enslaved people. Of course they did. The GOP was not initially an anti-slavery party. It was an anti-slave owner party.
I guess that's the way of looking at it. Yeah.
Anti-slavery came after 1863. Let's take a look at the origins of the Republican Party, shall we?
Okay.
She says, let's. She says the spark that ignited a new party was the 1854 Kansas-Nebraska Act. Until then, white men had an uneasy truce over slavery, otherwise known as folks. Those are the folks who voted. Under the 1820 Missouri Compromise, slavery couldn't go to western lands acquired under the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, above a certain parallel here with Missouri accepted. House representation is by population. In 1854, the booming North dominated, and Senate representation is 2 per state, kind of problem we see right now. So a small minority of rich slave owners dominated and stopped laws that a majority wanted. More northern states meant Southerners would lose power. Illinois Senator Stephen Douglas, like Lincoln Douglas,
yes, I guess
wanted to organize western land to run a railroad over it. Right? I mean, so it's good because the whole history of the country isn't well-meaning people with just high-minded ideas. Southern senators said they wouldn't let any northern states in without southern states to balance the Senate. So the Kansas-Nebraska Act opened to slavery land free under the Missouri Compromise, and northerners howled. Why? Because enslaved labor undercut more expensive free labor. I mean, if you want to build a railroad and your business model happens to have a different kind of labor plan,
yeah,
you can bring in Chinese workers and pay them nothing.
Oh, I see.
But you have to feed them.
Yes, she's confused me here by calling it free labor. Like it's not like no cost
totally
labor.
free.
Those people
but
are
it's
not
more
enslaved.
expensive labor. And
yes,
if rich Southern slave owners took over the West, free workers couldn't compete. Free meaning non-slave.
Right.
Not free meaning it doesn't cost anything. I'm not paying the wages.
Where are they getting free labor, but not from slaves?
Free versus slave. So free workers couldn't compete. Rich men would take everything. They'd control the West, overawe the North in Congress, and slavery would become national. Few white Northern men really cared about black rights. They cared that oligarchs were out to destroy the democracy.
I hate oligarchs.
So, a very few, very wealthy slave owners were trying to gain the system to take over. And again, Northerners talked of how oligarchs are crushing ordinary men. Northerners organized to fight against the measure. Franklin Pierce put huge pressure on Northern Democrats to go along with the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which would undercut that. They finally did. This radicalized the Democratic Party by bleeding all the moderates out of it, leaving it for pro-slavery radicals.
Aha.
And the morning after the Kansas-Nebraska Act passed, May 9th, 1854, Northern congressmen from all parties met at Mrs. Crutchett's boarding house, which were the rooms of Massachusetts Representative Edward Dickinson, who happened to be Emily Dickinson's father, to talk of a new Republican Party to oppose the slave power. And it seemed clear the slave power wanted to control the nation. Settlers in the new territories of Kansas and Nebraska were supposed to decide for themselves, but pro-slavery men blatantly stole Kansas' election then in 1856 and attacked the headquarters of the anti-slavers. So days later, after Massachusetts Senator Charles Sumner compared the oligarchs trying to force their will on Kansas to slave owners raping enslaved women, the Southern representative beat Sumner almost to death on the floor of the Senate while Southerners looked on.
Wow, they really loved defending their sex slaves.
The slave power was willing to kill Northern senators for speaking against them. The power was growing. In 1856, those afraid they were losing democracy coalesced around Republicans. They became Republicans. Abraham Lincoln joined in May of that year, and the GOP candidate John C. Fremont barely lost in 1856. In his inaugural address, Democrat James Buchanan said SCOTUS would solve the slavery issue and everybody should cheerfully agree. Put your faith in SCOTUS, guys, right? Just like we do now. Days later, SCOTUS hands down Dred Scott, saying Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. Congress can't keep slavery out of the West.
Susan Collins was deeply concerned.
Then things happened. Lincoln had his House Divided speech, and then things went from there.
Wow. I can't believe Susan Collins blew that SCOTUS call under James Buchanan.
And there's a lot longer with documentation, but basically, so the idea that Republicans always opposed slavery is not right. They opposed slave owners, and having the power of the country in the hands of a few is what they opposed. That's a completely different thing. And then one of the Twitter followers said, well, then why aren't they the anti-oligarchy party now? And she said, well, that's a fascinating question for another day. So I look forward to another tweet explaining all of that.
Yeah, I mean, passage of time, I guess I would call it. And
Yeah. Historian, author, I study the contrast between image and reality in America, especially in politics. I think that's just a fascinating thread and just a reminder that things that we should have learned in school and maybe didn't, or even if we did but have forgotten, weren't always taught to us in exactly the same way that it happened. And these things occur. And especially if a few states like Texas control the textbook market by saying, if you don't put this in or you don't take that out, we're not buying your textbooks. So what kids learn these days, you just had a graduating high school kid who probably knows more than most. Nonetheless, even for those of us who follow this, it's a good reminder that things aren't always so simple. And our country is complicated.
It is. And, people, I don't know, people don't realize it, I guess, as we keep seeing people ask questions like that. How come they're not the anti-oligarchy party now, or aren't we? Democrats were the ones who were pro-slavery, and nothing has changed ever since. And there's no, So people don't seem to understand how these things change over time. But that is interesting. And I guess they're not the anti-oligarchy party for a number of reasons, and probably not the least of which is really how do you start a national party that starts from nothing and then within a couple of years wins the presidency. And I guess if you look at it and say, well, we're talking about anti-oligarchy, but a certain kind of oligarchy, of course. slave-owning oligarchy. And if you need to power up a national party quickly and it's based in northeastern interests, I assume you're going to need a large chunk of money, and you're going to need it fast, and that comes from oligarchs of a different kind. They're not anti-oligarchy so much as they are pro-northern oligarchy, northeastern oligarchy, and anti-southern oligarchy.
So the idea that you have this group and then the moderates, or even the ones who are less than moderate but not quite radical, leave, and what you're left with is an incredibly radical group. Kind of reminds me of the Freedom Caucus with Justin Amash walking out.
Well, yeah, but he's just the one guy leaving so far. But okay.
Right. And when Justin Amash is the moderate, what does that tell you about the rest of the group? I mean, really.
Not too much.
So these things have happened before, and it usually doesn't end well. And I suspect that'll be the case here. So the big poll yesterday was Quinnipiac.
Oh, all right.
And what happens? Quinnipiac comes out and just verifies a lot of what the pundits were writing. Okay, and what does Quinnipiac say? Quinnipiac says that if you were looking at head-to-heads between Trump and various and sundry Democratic candidates, Biden beats Trump nationally by 13. That's a lot.
Oh, that is.
Sanders beats Trump by 9. Harris beats Trump by 8. Warren beats Trump by 7. Buttigieg beats Trump by 5, and so does Booker.
Okay.
In other words, everybody beats Trump.
Right. Everybody jumps queen.
Yeah. So everybody gets to win there. So that's bad. And at the same time, a story came out in the New York Times that Tony Fabrizio, Trump's pollster, had done some internal polling of 17 states, including key Rust Belt states, and Trump was getting trounced. Oh. So he told this to Trump, and Trump said, well, when you talk about it with the public, just tell him I'm doing great.
Say the opposite. Okay.
And then he tweeted about that this morning. So that was in the New York Times as well. What's fascinating about the Quinnipiac poll, let's look at Biden just because he happens to be in the lead there. If the election for president were held today, of all voters, Trump gets 40 and Biden gets 53. Trump is basically not getting more than 42% against anybody. Trump is stuck at 42. He's losing. Well, we'll get to the pundits pointing that out, but I've pointed this out for a while to you now. He's not the favorite. This is no guarantee of winning. Of course, you have to do the hard work. But he's trailing. He's not the favorite right now. Anyway, if you look at all of the voters, Trump is 40, Biden is 53. 13-point lead. If you look at 18 to 34-year-olds, Biden beats Trump 63-27.
Okay.
Right? Among the 35 to 49, a more usual normal Biden 50, Trump 42. The most conservative group has always been the 50 to 64-year-olds. They're the ones that grew up under Reagan. Trump 48, Biden 47. But this is the astounding number. 65 and older, you want to predict? Biden's Trump with 65 and older.
Well, they like Biden, but they also are Trumpers. I mean, I guess Biden's probably going to win there too, but by how much?
By how much? Biden 56, Trump 39.
That's more than
you would have
before. It was 13 for all, right?
Yeah.
This is like 16, 17? 17. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if the election were held today, and you would want to hurry up and hold the election today.
Trump won that group by 9 in 2016.
Oh, yeah. See, they're a very strange group.
They flipped.
It's right.
They're
and
flippers.
At their age,
they are
dangerous.
Persuadable. You can persuade people to change their vote.
Right. And they always think it's 12
maybe the
o'clock,
hardcore people will die off. I don't know, but this is a huge number in the sense that Trump cannot win with those kind of numbers. He can't.
That's supposed to be how it works. Yes.
It cannot happen. Not with the margins being that great. You can look at national polling and say, well, that doesn't tell you anything about the states. Well, Fabrizio's story does in terms of what the state polls say. And by the way, when the margin is that big, 13 points. It tells you a lot about the states. The same thing that we see in public polling, because we've already had state public polling showing that Biden's beating Trump by 13 in Michigan, for example. So all of that is highly relevant. And while that poll is coming out, let me just give you an idea of some of the stories that are coming out. Josh Kraushaar, conservative-leaning columnist writing in the National Journal. Basically, grim polling for Trump and why it's not likely to get much better. The reality, Trump's in the weakest political shape of any sitting president since George H.W. Bush. Despite a historically strong economy, and by the way, we've talked on the show about there's a lot of separation in people's mind between the economy and how they vote these days. His job approval ratings are still badly underwater. He's never hit 50%. At least 40% of voters are fired up to vote against him no matter what happens in the next year. He's lost ground with working class voters that defected from Democrats to support him in 2016, and his favorably rating dropping 19 points among the critical Obama-Trump constituency in the last 2 years. That's that 5 to 8% margin. So the latest wave of polling is even more alarming for Trump. His campaign's own internal shows him trailing reportedly in many of the must-win battlegrounds. A new Q poll shows Trump trailing all 6 Democrats tested against him. What's more, he couldn't win more than 42% of the vote against anyone. And that's why you see on Twitter this morning a whole lot of, root canal 47, Trump 42. Being stuck in an elevator, 49, Trump 41. There's just a ton of those because it gives you the idea of how he's doing right now.
Yeah. All right. How's Scabies doing against him?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And we'll follow up with Harry Enton, Charlie Cook, and a host of other people who really think the same thing.
Well, all right. I can live with that. That's good news. And, there are a lot of people who, in the impeachment atmosphere, and when we're being implored by certain others to wait and settle it at the ballot box, there would be a great satisfaction in doing that. But, of course, you could enjoy both. It's not that they both can't happen. But anyway, something to look forward to. And some more of it coming up after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We got more to talk about. That is some astounding margin. Is a 13-point margin. Isn't that also the score of the women's national soccer team game?
13-0. Yeah.
So there you go. I don't know. It means something.
Right.
13.
Brian Beutler's floating the idea that what happens is Trump loses, then he resigns before the next president takes office, and then Pence, who still becomes president in that scenario, then pardons him.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
And I said, okay, so Brian, what happens if in that scenario Trump loses, he steps down, he's terrified about going to jail, and President Pence doesn't pardon him?
That would be interesting.
That would be fascinating. It's like, no, thanks.
That would be funny.
Thanks for all the fish, but no, thanks. No, you're out of here.
It would be great. I don't know what would motivate him to do that, but I wonder if I could think of something.
Well, Mother might tell him to.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
But the other side of the coin, of course, is you can't pardon for state offenses. So
true. I guess it has to be. So he could get arrested by the state.
Anyway,
by New York State.
The other story
Indiana should arrest
Times that was interesting is Trump needs a target to stay interested in his campaign. For now, it's Biden, say the insiders. That if he's not focused, he just doesn't do as well. And Simon Rosenberg interprets that. It's like a Kremlinology, that this story appeared at all as a clear sign people around Trump think he's in really bad shape for his reelection, isn't focused on fixing his problems, and are now leaking about it to raise alarms in the broader GOP. It's a big 2020 story. Here's Axios, the conveyor of all things conventional wisdom, with a story from 2 hours ago entitled Trump's Reelection Crisis, and talks about the state of plays. Internal polls show it, national polls show it, and even a poll in reliably conservative Texas shows it. All as Trump should be crushing it. Unemployment's at a near historic low. The economy's growing. Peace and prosperity abound. Of course, we know better. It's hit and miss depending upon where you're at. But his numbers are sagging. The New York Times reported this story about Fabrizio. After being briefed on a devastating 17-state poll conducted by his campaign pollster, Mr. Trump told aides that deny that his internal polling showed him trailing Mr. Biden in many of the states he needs to win. People are now taking Trump's head and sticking it on Baghdad Bob's body. Trump instructed aides to say publicly other data showed him doing well.
Sure.
Jared and Ivanka come to the office and say you're doing fine.
Yeah.
One of the things you have to remember when you try to interpret Trump's so-called strategy, he doesn't really have any, he just reacts to the moment, but the people around him try to craft a strategy. You have to remember that a lot of the people around him in the White House are really stupid. So that a lot of the things that you think doesn't make any sense, they don't make sense because those guys aren't that bright. Right?
Well.
Especially if Jared is the one. No, I'm the one that has to direct the campaign, not this Pascal guy.
Yeah.
National Journal's Josh Krasher, we talked about Trump's being in the weak political state. Pay little attention to national polls in a race where states are what matters, but as a sign of voter mood, 6 Democrats each beat Trump in the first 2020 Q poll. Okay?
Right.
And Trump's people say, "Oh, don't worry about it. He always underpolls." We're just going to wind up calling them socialists. That's how they're going to win.
That is probably the plan.
And as Axios points out, but the self-avowed socialists are beating him.
That appears to be true too.
Right. So as far as a strategy, I don't know if that's a great strategy. Maybe instead of looking at Axios, which is kind of superficial, let's look at Harry Enton, who does a much better job with analysis. Basically, his headline says it all. Trump would likely lose an election held today. The poll of the week is actually a Glenn Gariff group poll from the state of Michigan showing that Biden leads President Donald Trump in a hypothetical 2020 matchup 53-41, following a January poll in which Biden was ahead of Trump by similar low double-digit margins. What's the point? The 2020 election's a long way off, and we don't know what Trump will do over the next 17 months. It's like more than 500 days. And we don't know who the Democrats will nominate. But Trump likely needs something to change if he wants to win re-election. Biden clearly, and currently the Democratic frontrunner, has a clear lead over Trump in the state that had the closest margin in the 2016 presidential election. And this Michigan poll was not the only survey out this week that indicates Trump re-election bid is currently in trouble. Charlie Cook puts it this way: quantifying the Trump penalty goes on to make the case that a normal Republican should be up like 55% to whatever with the other side. But the 2020 Trump campaign is sure to be vastly more sophisticated and better financed than the dumpster fire organization in the 2016 effort. But if Trump is reelected, it's going to be because Democrats screw up.
I guess.
Right? Now, Charlie goes on to say, a lot of my journalist friends would strongly disagree, but Trump doesn't get much slack from the media. When his backers say he's not treated fairly, they're not entirely wrong. But to think that it's the sole reason for historically low poll numbers is an exercise in denial. He gets bad coverage because he does bad things.
Yes.
Often when Trump is right or does something well, the way in which he does it keeps him from getting any credit outside of his base at 35% or so. They love what he does and how he does it, but this style grates or outright offends many outside his base. You've heard that before. In so many ways, he's his own worst enemy. So another example of him trailing.
Fair enough.
And so what I'm saying is and this one from John Harwood, it may be time for Wall Street to recalibrate its expectation that Trump will win re-election next November. Okay. Aaron Blake writing the same thing in the Washington Post. So the idea here is that Trump is starting to edge into we're starting to pay attention and you really suck territory in terms of polling. And you have to step back and say, well, what sort of news stories are going to break through everybody's media bubble and actually make a difference. And, you scratch your head sometimes about that. But here's a really interesting one. Navigator Survey did a poll, partisan group. Will Jordan is their pollster, or works with them, and he was the one that was posting this. In recent weeks, how much have you seen or heard about the following news items?
Okay.
All right. Rising tensions between the U.S. and Iran, 2020 Democratic presidential primary election, trade war between the U.S. and China, debate around the potential impeachment of Donald Trump, congressional investigations into Donald Trump, abortion bans passed in Alabama, Georgia, and other states.
I have seen those things.
You've seen all of them. And they ask, how much have you seen? A lot, some, a little, or nothing?
Okay.
The story that has gotten the most attention from people, that they've paid a lot of attention to, or if you add a lot and some together, you get really high numbers, isn't the Democratic primary. No. It isn't the trade war. It isn't impeachment.
Oh.
It's abortion ban.
Okay.
That is the single story that has gotten everybody's attention.
Okay, I could see that.
Not necessarily in a good way. Other polls show that in every single state, people oppose overturning Roe v. Wade. And so, essentially, Trump is continuing with the strategy that he thinks got him elected if you pretend that the Russians and Comey don't exist. You absolutely, positively laser focus on your base. You ignore everybody else. Then you get a particular candidate, whether it's Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever, or Liz Warren, and then you try to destroy them personally and say, I know I'm bad. I know you hate me. I know you think that person over there is like even worse. Lock them up. And that's a strategy. And, it's not going to work, but that's a strategy.
Well, it shouldn't have worked the first time.
It shouldn't, but this time he doesn't have Comey, and this time he doesn't have the Russians doing it blindly. At least we're aware of it. Of course, they're still going to be there in a big way. Yeah. So it won't be easy, but, a whole lot of problems here. Now, as this is happening and as it seeps through to the consciousness of everybody that, Trump's not doing that well, you see this garden industry of pundits who basically do this. Democrats did this thing, or Democrats threatened to do this thing, or I'm afraid Democrats will do this thing. Go too far left. Pick something.
Okay.
And this makes Trump's reelection more likely.
Oh. Yeah,
right?
that seems to be very popular.
Constantly. It drives me nuts, but you see it constantly. So Mike Gerson was the latest. Abortion supporters have made Trump's reelection more likely, he writes. And as I pointed out on the Pundit Roundup this morning, what it really means when you say something's going to make Trump's reelection more likely is, number one, I don't like this thing.
Yes.
And number two, I don't have any data to back up the assertion that it's going to hurt. But, and this is the important part to me, Trump's reelection is such an unpopular idea, I can use it to make a point I want to make.
Yeah.
And that's the genre. And you have to recognize that when you see it. So whenever somebody says, usually on the conservative side, often never Trumpers, they specialize in this.
Oh, yeah.
That's just going to make Trump re-election more likely.
Sure. Yeah, okay. We have seen a lot of that.
Well, not according to the polls. We just went over those.
Well, what's data and quantitative analysis compared with the things that they want?
How are abortion supporters going to make Trump's re-election more likely when, in fact, the radicals, remember radicals? We started talking about radicals at the beginning of this. Everybody's left the party, so the radicals are left.
Yes.
So the radicals are starting to push through unpopular abortion bans in Missouri, in Louisiana, in Georgia, in Alabama, so on and so forth. And they're unpopular. They are unpopular. How is that going to make Trump's reelection more likely?
In a very mysterious way that I have on this sheet of paper.
Because it agrees with me. Yes. Speaking of sheets of paper, he does that, right? He shakes around a sheet of paper. I think you mentioned that at the opening of the show. I have a secret deal here with Mexico. I have this, I have that. Joe McCarthy used to do that, and perhaps it's no surprise because Roy Cohen was one of Joe McCarthy's lawyer, was one of Donald Trump's favorite people. Yeah,
well, I mean, it seems to be a favorite thing of his to do. He really forgets that he does it all the time, and that we know it. So I guess he just continues. I don't know. I'm not certain how anything would make Trump's reelection more likely at this point, not certainly that opponents are doing is interesting. Although, what was his name? David French does that every week. Every week he has something else that's going to make. Although, people say that about impeachment too.
As I say, it's a favorite thing of never Trumpers.
Yeah. I guess you must be right about that.
All right. So here's my last piece before I go. This is a different Charlie Cook piece from the National Journal. Oh. Who will make the Final Four? You like Final Four. You like your lanes and brackets and choices. Who will make the Final Four of the Democratic field?
Why are we down? I don't know. They like four.
Rather than try to pick a nominee, it's safer to guess who's most likely to make the Elite Eight or even the Final Four.
Yeah, well, hell, if you can narrow it down to 8, you're going to get some right.
Right? So it's easier to do that. So the things to look for include national polling, Iowa, New Hampshire, fundraising. When the second quarter Federal Election Commission reports come out in July, look at contributions, not total receipts, which include funds transferred from other campaign accounts. Also pay attention to cash on hand and burn rate. How much is the campaign spending as a percentage of contributions during that period? My new favorite metric is tracking the Google searches for each candidate every week as measurement of the ebb and flow of interest. And Google News Lab assigned the number 100 to the candidate who receives the most Google searches, Joe Biden most recently. Then give every other candidate a number representing the number of searches for them scaled against that. So it's important to remember Google search reflects curiosity. Pete Buttigieg was the only other candidate to rate higher than 50 on Google's index. So here's the Elite Eight and Final Four. In alphabetical order, it's Biden, Buttigieg, Booker, Killer Bees there, Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar, that's 5. Beto is 6, Bernie 7, and Liz Warren is 8.
Okay, that's a lot.
Those are the serious candidates. Everybody else, bye.
Yeah, you would have trouble with holding a debate just with those 8.
Right. So I'm sorry, Bill de Blasio, you thought you had enough B's in your name to be in there. No, not happening. No. So for the other candidates, breaking through the cacophony of voices is much more difficult. So, and who gets to the Final Four? Biden.
Yeah.
Right? As a front runner, he's the piñata at this point, with his rivals and media alike trying to knock him down. There were a lot of people who were in Iowa listening to the day that Biden wasn't there.
Oh, yes, right.
Right, everybody else, and some of the lower tier people were attacking Biden. The upper tier people had the good sense not to do that. It didn't go over well with the crowd. Yeah. Just saying. I see Biden akin to a heavily loaded 747 out of Dulles. Every seat's occupied. You wonder whether it will get off the ground, much less clear the tree line. But if it does, it'll go all the way.
Okay.
That's a long way of saying if the Biden machine gets wobbly, it's going to be in the next 90 days. If he doesn't, if he's still the leader by the fall, then he's probably going to win it.
Could be. Okay.
Next lot. Okay. That's next lot for the Final Four. And this is a hedge. It's either Sanders or Warren, but not both. Okay. There's enough pure progressives in the party to guarantee one, but not two. Sanders enjoys twice the support of Warren, but Warren is doing very well catching up. Watch the primary in New Hampshire, next door to his Vermont and her Massachusetts. The third slot should go to Harris, and the final most subjective slot probably Buttigieg. That would be his. Wow. So he's basically saying Buttigieg, Warren, Harris, and Biden are probably going to be the finalists.
Okay.
Now, who wins there? He can't say.
Wow. All right. Well, Buttigieg. Okay, taking that 7-10 upset all the way to the Final Four.
There's got to be an upset. There's got to be an upset winner who goes part way and then doesn't win it.
Yeah, that does happen from time to time. We do see those things. Okay. Or the 2-race winner who falters into Belmont.
Well, exactly. At the other side of the coin. I mean, there's always, if you go back, there's always a Davidson or a Gonzaga who announces themselves on the national scene that you didn't see coming.
Right. And then stays there, though. Gonzaga is...
Now. Yeah. Like when they first showed up, who were they?
Right. Right. Oh, it goes back a long, long way, though.
But I go back a long, long way.
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I kind of like that Triple Crown one, too. I feel like he's maybe the Smarty Jones of the field.
It could be.
Okay.
Well, anyway, so we have that. There's a lot going on, and given the fact that it's getting to be summer, you'd think that a lot of this would be, let's wait till fall. They do a lot of that with campaigning. But in this particular case, I think that the way things are set up is likely how things are going to, proceed for the next little while. So we'll see. We have a debate coming up next month. That'll reset things.
All right.
And then we'll go from there. So that's my piece for today. I'm actually doing the pundit roundup tomorrow as well because Tim Lang's away. So and I'll be on the show, so at least I'll have some material to talk about. Good. One thing I'll talk about tomorrow is Ron Brownstein's observation. The Democrats are betting big on big plans. They're saying to the electorate, it's the Liz Warren match. I got a plan for that.
Yeah.
It's not just I promise you lower taxes and more services.
Yeah, well, that's default to the norm. That works too. Yeah, I mean, that has worked historically. I guess people are just hungry for a president who knows what they're doing or knows even what they want to do and can plan for it versus, hey, I don't know what's going to happen today. I'll watch TV and tell you later.
Yep, exactly right. So, what do you think?
Me, personally?
Enough about me. What do you think about what I just said?
Oh, I loved it. It was fantastic and the best 48 minutes I've spent today.
You're hired to run the Trump campaign. You have the right attitude.
Yeah. Just tell them whatever you want. We're winning. We're the number 1 show. And it says so right here on this piece of paper.
Yeah, that I'm holding in my hand on radio that you can't read.
Right. Not only can't you, I not let you read it, I won't even let you see me holding it.
Yeah, exactly right. Take care, and I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll go from there.
All right. Excellent. I'm ready for that. Thanks very much, Greg. Appreciate the roundup, and good news coming out of the polls. Can't beat that. And just hope it holds up. If only the election were held today. In fact, though, some elections were held yesterday. I forgot to mention to everybody that, it doesn't affect everybody, but we happen to have had our Virginia state legislature primaries yesterday, and I don't even know what the results were. That's how closely tied I was into that campaign, but I guess I ought to peek at that. But made it my business to drag the 18-year-old out as well and say, you got to vote in these primaries, and had to have him sit down and do a little study before taking him over to the polls. But I guess I should have made that reminder yesterday, and I didn't, and it's too late to change anything now. But I think we were talking to a relatively small portion of the audience, and generally speaking, I think they knew that was going on, but we fell down on that particular job yesterday. So we'll try and remind everybody when those things are coming up and when you have an obligation to make your voice heard, and getting there for the primaries is always an important thing. So tip of the hat to everybody who dragged themselves to the polls and dragged anybody else with them to the polls as well. All right, let's see. Heading over to Pocket, which has apparently been redesigned. The people at Pocket wanted me to know that I have a new Pocket awaiting, and I guess that's a good thing, but it requires an extra click or two and getting used to a new layout. But I think we can probably get over that problematic issue there. All right, and checking up on various comments that have been made along the way. Oh, yes, look, I forgot to, not only forgot to read, but forgot to retweet Bill's warning to everybody, early warning system, letting everybody know that the show was on live. Dang, I missed that one. Oh, well, I appreciate it at being there for me every day to lean on. Let's see. Oh, yes, whatever happened to that guy? There's a suggestion of a story here from Kate Sherrill, a thread about corrupt sheriffs in Alabama. Interesting, and that one catches my eye because didn't we read some time ago that there was that one? I think this is the upshot of that story, right? There was this one sheriff in Alabama where, I guess for whatever reason, they structured things such that the funds for actual feeding of prisoners in the county jails was set up such that the money was transferred directly to the sheriff for their personal disbursement, and whatever money you were able to squeeze out of that program, you would therefore keep as part of your own, I guess, it became a de facto part of your compensation. So the more prisoners who starved, the richer you would get. I don't know if that's a continuation of this story. I'm just sort of fascinated, and we'll take a look and see what that's about. I wasn't expecting to go there. She sent me the tweet of Connor Sheets. Who is Connor Sheets? I don't know. He's a blue check mark kind of person, so let's check in on it. Investigative reporter with an eye on criminal justice and civil rights at Alabama.com. I guess also a ProPublica local reporting fellow, if you will, there. Sheriffs across Alabama. We had a sheriff's election primary here in our county yesterday. There's sort of some link to what I was talking about earlier. Sheriffs across Alabama told me their predecessors took steps after losing 2018 re-election bids. And you can imagine why that would happen, given the story we were reading before. That undermined their offices and harmed the public, from destroying public property and wasting funds to pocketing public money. A breakdown of the allegations. Wow, so a big article from ProPublica. I don't know if I can justify going down that path this morning when there's so many other things to catch up with, but maybe I'll just read the tweet thread. How long is this? Oh dear, maybe not. But to give you some idea of what we're talking about, I guess that suggests that basically everybody would have emptied out those discretionary funds and taken them with them. And I suppose basically they sounds like they trashed the place after losing their primary elections or losing re-election in the general elections in 2018, and stole funds and burned the place down and left their predecessors without resources. Let's see. Just sort of interested in some of this. Marshall County Sheriff Phil Simms, who was a fantastic quarterback back in the day for the New York Giants, but now apparently Sheriff of Marshall County, Alabama. How did that happen? Different guy. 1M, Simms. Says his predecessor, Joe Pisarcik, it's not him, former Sheriff J. Scott Walls, left behind 5 of these government-issued smartphones with holes drilled through them. Hard drives were removed from 2 office computers, and reams of records were missing. So maybe those phones were full of racist texts from his deputies or something like that, or records of stolen proceeds. I have no idea what else would be in there. Simms alleges that a 40-pound bag of rice was poured down the drain the weekend before he took office, the last bit of food left in the jail he runs as sheriff. There was no food in the jailhouse kitchen when he took office, Simms said. So of course that is probably an outgrowth of that. They took, I guess, anything that they could use themselves and said, we've been defeated. Our opponent is going to have to start all over again, since we know that money comes essentially out of their pocket. Let them deal with it. Meanwhile, between December of 2017 and August of 2018, more than $81,000 worth of wire transfers were made from the Marshall County Sheriff's Office General Fund into one of Walls's personal bank accounts, Sheriff's Office records show. That's pretty interesting. Are these guys thinking this through all the way, that you would do this to the guy who now has the power to arrest you for these crimes? I don't know. Maybe they think that their deputies will remain loyal to them and refuse to effect the arrests, or nobody will convict me, or who knows. Very interesting. The records show no other wire transfers from the fund over the period, and 2 Sheriff's Office employees told me they did not know why the disbursements, more than $29,000 of which took place after Walls lost his re-election bid last year, why they were even made. So, interesting. So they catalog similar activities in several counties, I guess, where the sheriffs were thrown out. Very interesting, and I would say well worth a read if it weren't for the fact that the President of the United States and everyone who surrounds him were that much more corrupt and that much more dangerous, and therefore, I guess, deserving of our time. Okay, let's see. What else can we take a look at by way of contributions from? Let's see. Mad Hatter enjoyed the the callback to History of the World Part 1, was it? Everyone Jumps Queen. Right, yeah, well, problematic seeing that one. And let's see. That's not a bad idea. Culture of Truth Bobble speak, saying the Democratic House should call for a snap presidential election. We keep saying if the election were held today, call for a snap presidential election as provided in the Constitution. Why not? I say they go ahead and do that. It's not, of course, but don't tell anyone that. We could wave around a piece of paper that says this is the Constitution and it's totally in here. I also kind of thought we should have been claiming that yesterday's blank piece of paper was actually his resignation letter. And in order to prove to us that it wasn't, he would have to show us the contents. But I don't know. Everybody seemed to think that was far-fetched. I don't think there's any. I don't think you have to go far to fetch anything anymore, and anything is possible. So just keep that in mind. You make up your dirty tricks as you go along. All right. Plenty to catch up on. Scanning Pocket. I see, of course, we're coming up on our next break as well. So we're definitely going to have to, we'll have to wait for some of the longer stories to move on to the other side. We can update you on the contempt charges and what's happening with them. And I believe the Oversight Committee appears to be plowing on forward with their plans, although whether or not they will introduce a resolution worded similar to the one that finally made it to the floor was yesterday for the Judiciary Committee, we'll see whether they back off in the same way. They're involved in the same showdown with the same people, so it may be possible that we may see the same solution broken out for them. And as Greg mentioned earlier, Justin Amash having left the Freedom Caucus, having stepped down, and giving the usual speech that one does when one separates oneself, to use that phrase over and over again, from an organization like that. Yeah, I just didn't want to be a distraction for their fine work, which I still believe in very much. So I have stepped away from that one. But by the same token, I guess pulling a little bit of a Jeff Flake there yesterday. Apparently the voting was entirely along, or at least initially reported as being entirely along partisan lines on the Justice Department contempt, non-contempt resolution yesterday, which means, I guess, I'll have to check into it, that Justin Amash talked a big game about the rule of law and then walked away from it when he had a chance to vote for it. No surprise. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm just trying to see if I can track down this actual vote. I guess before we decide that we'll lay blame for his vote at the feet of Amash, I suppose we should take a look for it. But it seems to me like Congress.gov has reorganized their page a little bit, and I'm used to going to a certain spot to click for the lists of votes that took place recently, and either I misremember how the thing was set up, or I can't find it now. Let's see. Yesterday, I could just look at here at the Yesterday in Congress section and see if we can find this. On the floor of the House, bills, resolutions. Okay, there's 3 of them passed in the House. So we'll click through this way. I guess a roundabout way of getting to the votes. Let's see. DHS Acquisition Review Board Act of 2019. That's not it. Authorizing the Committee on the Judiciary to initiate or intervene in judicial proceedings to enforce certain subpoenas and for other purposes. Sir. So here it is. We found it also on the floor yesterday. Getting a vote. Looks like the rule for the Labor HHS Education Appropriations Bill. So moving those annual appropriations bills with dispatch. Here it is, though. H-Res 430. That's the one about authorizing the Committee on Judiciary to initiate or intervene in judicial proceedings question. And they must have had, I know they had the vote. How come it's not easy to click on and find that way? All right, well, we'll have to go through the full bill and then get around to what happened to it, actions. Boy, this is really slow going. Here we are, one roll call vote on it. So it's going to simply tell me that there was a vote and not display the results of the vote, other than to tell me it was 229 to 191. Here we are. Click again. That's really annoying. You have to click 5 times to get this. I think this reorganization of Congress.gov is not particularly helpful. But who knows what other bugs they were running into. All right, so no Republican yays for the vote, so I don't even have to look up what Amish did on that question. So big talk for the role of the rule of law in this, but at bottom he votes party line with Republicans when it comes to enforcing subpoenas. So keep that in mind about Justin Amish. Not certain he'll ever put his money or his vote where his mouth is. It probably comes as a surprise to no one, but just by way of verification, I thought I'd throw that out there. All right, let's see. Other things that want for discussion. We mentioned yesterday and read a little bit about the story of Jared Kushner's one of his many companies that he still held on to a leadership or a ownership stake in, Kagro, raking in $90 million from unknown overseas investors. Hope you got a chance to read through that one on your own. I guess along those lines, that is to say, corruption lines, more from, this is an interesting take on things, from the Independent, which I found an interesting. Let's see. Is this the no? That's not the original view. This is the new pocket view. They threw me a new look, and it's confusing as a result. But let's click on through to the Independent coverage of this. Donald Trump's transportation secretary, or as they say, transport secretary. This is a video presentation of this thing. Elaine Chao, of course, is who we're talking about, who they refer to as the transport secretary, has this. Should I read this? I mean, this is the text of a short video introducing the story. The headline is U.S. now this is the quote, now a full-fledged banana republic, unquote. Thank you. We finally made it. After revelations over Mitch McConnell's wife's $78 million grants. This video has this text to it. Donald Trump's Transport Secretary Elaine Chao has designated a special liaison, this is slow-moving text here, to help with grant applications from her senator husband's state, Kentucky. Of course, paving the way to fund projects worth $78 million. It has been reported the projects funded, as Mr. McConnell prepared to campaign for re-election, reportedly included road improvements in Republican political strongholds, time for traffic problems and others, I guess, for which grant applications had previously been rejected. Walter Schaub, the former director of U.S. Office of Government Ethics, described the arrangement as the sort of thing that should lead to the impeachment of an official. Too bad we're not going to have that. All right, well, we'll put a pause on that infinitely repeating video loop and head down to the text of the article. Though I imagine we just got pretty much the basic idea in 42 seconds worth of video. Defeats the purpose, though. Donald Trump's transport secretary designated a special liaison to help with grant applications for her senator husband's state, her senator husband, of course, being Mitch McConnell, the state being Kentucky, paving the way to fund projects worth a total, I guess, of $78 million, it has been reported. Elaine Chao personally asked a Department of Transportation aide to serve as an intermediary and advisor to Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and his Kentucky state officials, according to emails seen by Politico. Maybe I should head over there, then, if they're the ones who saw the emails, after all. No, clicked on the wrong thing, and instead clicked on Independent's database on Mitch McConnell there. The projects funded as Mr. McConnell prepared to campaign for re-election reportedly included road improvements in Republican political strongholds for which grant applications had previously been rejected. By the way, the Politico piece on the subject that they reference, titled Chao Created Special Path for McConnell's Favored Projects. And that's the heart of the matter here. Not a lot of you probably know a great deal about the way grants, federal grants, are handled inside of the departments with respect to steering them by Congress. Most people actually probably think that they routinely have a tremendous amount of influence in guiding that money. And they do in a different sort of way. That is, sometimes in creating federal grant programs, you can write the rules such that there are very few eligible projects in the country but the one you intended to fund. But they used to do those things with straight up earmarks and simply say, well, we're going to take part of this money and part of it will go to this project in, say, Atlantic City, New Jersey, and the rest of the fund can be competitively awarded. They have shied away from that in recent years. But when it's a straight up open competitive grant program, although members of Congress very frequently write letters to the secretaries of those departments asking for every consideration to be given to the project they favor, the ordinary routine treatment of these things is there are, low-level people in the secretary's office who say, okay, duly noted, and will make a copy of that letter and put it in the file. But it's really not supposed to bear on the grant-making decisions, the grant awards. However, all members of Congress do it anyway, because if you don't do it and then your constituents don't win the grant, then they blame you for not going to bat for the grant. But you're supposed to cut the politics out of these competitive grant-making programs, even though everybody knows that they're only very often the remnants of what's left after the earmarking has gone on. In other words, though, it would be a pretty big breach of protocol under normal circumstances for the transportation secretary to say, I want a high-level person in my office looking out for and guiding and advising the grant applications made by my husband's office for his home state. That would be a tremendous departure from standard practice and a tremendous departure from anti-corruption practice, generally speaking. So the projects funded, of course, in this case, had been rejected in the past, which means that they ordinarily fail on their merits. They're not worth funding, or they're not of sufficiently widespread benefit or whatever. Walter Schaub, former director of the U.S. Office of Government Ethics, described the arrangement as, quote, the sort of thing that should lead to the impeachment of an official. Yes, and he's the one, I guess, who said, we are now a full-fledged banana republic. So get your bananas. They should be pretty cheap at the market these days. All right, scrolling on down and past thousands and thousands of pictures and videos. Ms. Chow and her aide, Todd Inman, have reportedly met annually with a delegation from Owensboro, a river port city in Kentucky that has long connections with Mr. McConnell over the last 3 years. That doesn't seem very long, but okay. They've met with them over the last 3 years. The connections have been longer, I suppose. In their April 2017 meeting, according to people present, they discussed 2 projects of local economic importance, a plan to upgrade road connections to a commercial port, and a proposal to reclassify a major road a branch of motorway. Okay. Following the meeting, Mr. Inman is said to have emailed the Port Authority with advice on how to improve its application. He also allegedly discussed the project by phone with Al Mattingly, the chief executive of Daviess County, which includes Owensboro. Mr. Mattingly said that Mr. Inman had been instrumental in helping to secure the DOT grant. Todd probably smoothed the way. Used his influence, he told Politico. Everybody says that projects stand on their own merit, right? So if I've got 10 projects and they're all equal, where do you go to break the tie? He's basically saying, I love corruption, and here's exactly how it worked and who I talked to. Let's put it this way. I only have her ear of an hour when I go to visit her once a year. With a local guy, he has her ear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. John Hudak, a senior fellow in governance at Washington, D.C.'s Brookings Institution, said the case raised ethical questions. Really? I could have told you that. Where a cabinet secretary is doing things that are going to help her husband get reelected, that starts to rise to the level of feeling more like corruption to the average American, he said. I do think there are people who will see that as sort of swamp behavior. They just won't care about it. A DOT spokesman told The Independent that Politico's story intentionally misleads readers, misrepresenting the grant application process and disregarding key facts. A few grants to one state have been selectively isolated to misrepresent the works DOT does across the country, he said. The spokesman added, DOT's chief of staff does not offer technical assistance to grant applications, and no state receives special treatment from the department, which was just reported that they did. But their answer is, no, they didn't. Our team of dedicated career staff does an outstanding job evaluating hundreds of applications for those highly competitive grant programs. A thorough process developed well before this administration. That's true. They simply circumvented it this time in order to give Mitch McConnell some additional pork to bring home. That doesn't really answer the charge. Okay, well, very interesting and certainly something to keep an eye on. And wanted to make sure that it was on the record before things got too late. Let's see. I've got another couple of things to bring up. Let's see. And I know I have still waiting in the wings a few other things that I meant to give some time to. As a matter of fact, why don't we roll that now? I have been hanging on to for a little bit too long the piece that Paula Ryder recorded in reading us Dan Pfeiffer's plan for dealing with impeachment, plan to win on impeachment. And I hinted at that and the number of articles that were out there talking about various strategies for approaching these things, but haven't rolled it yet. Maybe we can bring that one out. But before I do, let's see. One comment here from Michael Musson, who says the Chow-McConnell corruption story should mention that Chow did this by hiring McConnell's campaign guy. That's who Todd Inman is. And putting him in charge of this particular job at transportation. That is a key fact that seems to have been left out, at least of the Independent's article on this. I'm curious now whether the Politico story, you would think that they would have made mention of that. And now I kind of want to do a quick skim of their reporting and see if they mention it. Chow's aide, Todd Inman, it says up near the top, who stated in an email to McConnell's office that Chow had personally asked him to serve as an intermediary. Yeah, I don't know if they ever. Inman, himself a longtime Owensboro resident and one-time mayoral candidate who is now Chow's chief of staff, followed up. No, I mean, it doesn't appear to mention that he's formerly McConnell's. Oh yeah, well here it is. Yeah, okay, down a little bit lower. So that comment that got reported in the Independent story has a little bit more context in the Politico story, right? Todd, yeah, that's Inman, probably smoothed the way. I mean, used his influence. Mattingly said in a Politico interview, everybody says the projects stand on their own merit. So if I've got 10 projects and they're all equal, where do you go to break the tie? Well, let's put it this way. I only have her ear for an hour when I go to visit her once a year, he added of Chow and Inman. And I guess Inman is the local guy who then has her ear 24/7. That was missing, I think. Here in Politico, it's put this way. This is, he's got her ear 24/7. He added of Chow and Inman. And here it says, a longtime Bluegrass State operative who had worked as McConnell's advance man. With a local guy, he has her ear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You tell me. That's interesting. And I mean, was that just left out? That quote, all of it was there somewhere in the Independent's reporting. Oh, I got to scroll past all these pictures and everything again. And see if we can find our way to this one. Here it is. Yeah. Break the tie. Let's put it this way. Yeah, it doesn't explain. I was kind of confused as to what does he mean that with a local guy he has her ear 24/7. There's no explanation for what that is supposed to mean, and they left that out. Huh. Well, that's pretty problematic all by itself. Thanks for pointing that out, Michael. Anyway, let me switch over now to our pre-recorded piece from Dan Pfeiffer, read to us by Paula Ryder with additional commentary on the plan to win the impeachment.
Hi, David. While the impeach, don't impeach, when to impeach debate continues to rage, I am firmly on the side of starting an impeachment process. And here is a piece that lays out a plan of attack for winning an impeachment effort. It's called A Plan to Win the Impeachment Fight. It was in Crooked Media on May the 30th, and it was written by Dan Pfeiffer. Bob Mueller broke his 2-year-long silence this week to send a message to the Democrats in Congress. I did my job, now it's time to do yours. Despite the protestations from Democratic leaders and hand-wringing from pundits and consultants, it seems like House Democrats will vote for an impeachment inquiry sooner rather than later. The moral and constitutional arguments for impeachment are much stronger than, yes, Trump committed crimes, but we can't impeach him because of politics or something. With that in mind, Democrats need a plan to manage the politics and maximize the spotlight of an impeachment inquiry. Impeachment is undoubtedly the politically riskier path, but also the one with the greatest upside for the country and the party. If Democrats are united behind a smart strategy, they can use an impeachment inquiry to prosecute a devastating case against Trump that increases the likelihood that Democrats win the White House, expand our House majority, and take the Senate. First, Democrats need a message. They need a concise and compelling argument for what Trump did wrong, how his misdeeds connect to the lives and concerns of voters, and why this merits the extraordinary response of impeachment. My suggestion for that message is: Donald Trump has abused his power to hide multiple crimes and massive corruption. He has used the presidency to punish his enemies, reward his friends, and enrich himself at the expense of the American people. No one is above the law, not even a rich politician. This narrative, or one like it, needs to be repeated over and over again by every Democratic member of Congress and talking head. The Democratic super PACs should run ads. The grassroots organizations should be delivering this message at the door, on the phone, and in town halls. The Democratic presidential candidates should make it part of their message. No voter should be confused about why this is happening and what is at stake. Second, the impeachment inquiry should be broader than the crimes outlined in the Mueller report. A narrow focus on Trump's obstruction of the Russia investigation makes it easier for the Republicans to accuse Democrats of trying to relitigate 2016 and deprive Democrats the opportunity to introduce evidence of additional impeachable offenses that Trump has committed since taking office. An impeachment inquiry should look broadly at Trump's abuse of power, his politicization of our law enforcement and intelligence agencies, his refusal to protect our elections and our country from foreign sabotage, and the rampant corruption in an administration where everyone from the president on down enriches themselves at the expense of American taxpayers and America's security. One of the reasons I really like this article is because it's making that point. It's maddening to me that so many people seem to think that Trump should only or can only be impeached based on what Mueller has found or not found. There's a host of areas that render Trump unfit to be president and his administration unfit. Back to the article. Third, an impeachment inquiry should be plotted out more like a TV show than a trial. The star witnesses in high-profile hearings should be spaced out and timed for maximum impact. They should tell a story about Trump's misdeeds. There should be no rush to get this over with quickly or to meet some artificial timeline. The audience for this show is not the Senate. It is not Twitter, and it's not a panel on Morning Joe. The audience is the American people, and specifically the new and sporadic Democratic voters who turned out in 2018, or the independents and Republicans who say that they are most concerned about Trump's conduct. Our job is to persuade them, not the DC pundit class. Fourth, turn the relative unpopularity of impeachment into an asset. The polls are clear that impeachment is unpopular. Majorities oppose it right now. While that fact may change over time, Democrats should make a virtue of the fact that they are taking a principled position out of conviction rather than calculation or convenience. Fifth, use Senate Republicans as a foil. Mitch McConnell has already indicated that no matter what crimes Trump may have committed, he will do everything in his power to ensure that the president escapes accountability. Democrats should view this as an opportunity to pressure Republican senators who are vulnerable in 2020. If Cory Gardner or Susan Collins or Martha McSally refuse to hold Trump accountable, paint them as Trump flunkies who put party over country. Every one of them is aiding and abetting the president's corruption and criminality. Yes, another thing that's so frustrating about this impeachment debate is the way that so many Democrats, and I mean rank and file folks that comment on this and worry about it as well as some of our leadership, the way they all act like Republicans have this endless, invincible ability to frame everything and to position everything, and that Democrats have zero ability to push back in any way or to go on offense in any way or to frame anything, etc., etc. It's not true. It doesn't have to be true. It shouldn't be true, and it isn't true. Finally, Democrats must show the public that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. At Trump's unhinged statement in the Rose Garden last week, he previewed his response to impeachment. Trump wants to run against the investigate everything, do nothing Congress. Democrats should rob this argument of its political potency by laying out a detailed legislative agenda that focuses on the kitchen table issues that matter most to voters. Pass these bills in the House and then hold public events demanding that McConnell give them a vote in the Senate. None of these bills will become law, but they'll give Democrats a platform to run on, as well as a response to Republican attacks and media hand-wringing. The piece concludes, there's no question whether impeachment is the right vote, only if it's the right politics. I can't tell you how the politics of impeachment will play out. No one can. But through impeachment proceedings, Democrats have the power to shape the debate, grab the microphone away from Trump, and tell a compelling story about why he is unfit to be president. The political risk is real, but so is the potential upside, if done well. No matter what Democrats do, Trump and Bill Barr will be falsely accusing Democrats of treason and spinning absurd conspiracy theories about the origins of the Mueller investigation. A well-planned and well-executed impeachment inquiry may be the only way to wrest the microphone from Trump and tell a story on our terms about who Trump is and the damage that he has wrought on our country. One of the things that everyone that listens here can do is call your representatives. Tell them that you want impeachment or moving towards impeachment. You want it started. You can leave similar messages for Nancy Pelosi, for Jerry Nadler, any other senators or congresspeople that you think are important. But certainly your representatives should be hearing from you on this front. Make the phone calls. They help. Thanks. This is Paula at paulawriter.com.
Thank you very much, Paula, and absolutely correct. And so I guess we'll put the first request on the record here. Jennifer Wexton. That's what I would like. I want to see movement. Yes, I'm willing to say it's towards impeachment, and you should know that, well, look, we bring a number of votes in your district that feels the same way. Don't back off. Don't take your cues from those Democrats in more marginal districts than you represent. But, okay, I know it's going to be a tough call, and she's probably not listening to the program, but I'll have to make that note and let her know that I feel that way, and I guess get as many people who are among my neighbors who feel the same way to do the same. Okay, breaking news on the oversight front. Kyle Cheney from Politico tweets this news out. Breaking, Trump has, I guess, gone ahead and asserted executive privilege over Census Bureau documents as the Oversight Committee prepares to hold Barr and Wilbur Ross as well in contempt. So this is where we stand now. We, of course, heard the story probably last week, maybe a little earlier than that the new documents coming to light from the recently passed gerrymandering guru in North Carolina, who I guess consulted in some way on the census citizenship question and left behind a paper trail asserting that it was his understanding that it would have a very marked and intentional effect on suppressing the votes of black voters in particular and other demographics that tend to vote very heavily Democratic. And that was indeed the point of the whole thing. And so now, I guess as Hunter put it on Twitter yesterday, if I can track that one down, he was just basically pointing out that, now nobody can read those documents because what this is it's racism, but it's executive racism, and you're not allowed to see it from now on because law and order, everybody. So good news on that front. Actually, of course, the exact opposite. Coming up on our third and final break before heading into the next segment, though, and I think I gotta readjust some of the volumes on this thing so we don't blow your ears out as the music rolls out. Got it just in time there. When we come back, let's see. There's been more news today, breaking in NBC News, just in case you thought that maybe the president hadn't violated the emoluments clause enough. Some new information, I think, on that front. Plus, of course, still want to flip back and cover that expanded look at Russia's social media interference as well. Coming up next. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Just grabbing a few additional links that I can share with you later on. But yeah, I wanted to double back and make sure that we had on record here somewhere the latest news on the emoluments front, because that's one of the more infuriating ones to me and seems like so obvious, but whatever. And I think maybe the most obvious evidence of corruption on the national and international scale as well. So, all right, NBC News reporting here. Shelby Hansen and Ken Delanian on this story. Reps, that is to say representatives, of 22 foreign governments have spent money at Trump properties, hinting at some serious emoluments problems here. The number of foreign governments hints at a significant foreign cash flow to the U.S. president that critics say violates the Constitution. Because it does. All right, here we are. And of course, it all centers on the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C., the hub of all of the illegal emoluments activity. Representatives of at least 22 foreign governments appear to have spent money at Trump Organization properties, and NBC News review has found, hinting at a significant foreign cash flow to the American president that critics say violates the U.S. Constitution. The extent and amount of foreign spending at Trump's hotels, golf clubs, and restaurants is not known because the Trump Organization is a private company and declines to disclose that information. Trump promised to donate any profits from foreign governments, and the Trump Organization has sent $343,000 to the U.S. Treasury for 2017 and 2018. The company did not release underlying numbers to support that figure. So time out. Just once again, always insist on the paperwork from Donald Trump, even if the paperwork is blank. That will usually prove the point, but at least they do make some mention of that here, although I don't think they make the point strongly enough. They could be lying, and honestly, you should expect that they are lying. And I guess I might as well just throw in there that I'd like to see the supporting documentation that the $343,000 has actually made it there. Of course, I'd like to see the underlying documentation that justifies the numbers, but I want to be assured that the checks were actually cut, cashed, the money moved, the whole bit. I want to see the bank records. I want to see the wire transfer records, whatever there is, to assure me that $343,000 worth of checks were actually cut, cashed, and the money moved. I mean, I think that should be pretty obvious, but with Donald Trump, I want to see every single thing there is. If you were prosecuting a case, that's what you would ask for. Amid 2 lawsuits accusing Trump of accepting illegal foreign payments, NBC News sought to compile the most comprehensive possible list of foreign spending at Trump properties based on information in the public record. In June 2018, a report by the watchdog group Public Citizen came up with 10 foreign governments that had spent money at Trump venues. More information has since become public. A spokeswoman for the Trump Organization did not respond to a request for comment by NBC News. Donald Trump is the first president in modern history to retain ownership of a business empire while in office. He says the company is being run by his sons, who he takes with him on state visits and who skip out on bar tabs while they're out there overseas representing the United States, but okay. But he continues to derive income from the various businesses, including his hotel in Washington, his federal financial disclosure forms show. But Trump has refused to release his tax returns, which present a fuller picture of his business dealings. Some experts have long argued that foreign payments to Trump's companies are illegal under the Emoluments Clause of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibits a president from accepting gifts or emoluments from foreign states lest they influence policy. I'll add here, back in the olden days, you were also in just as much trouble if there was the, to use the term of art, appearance of impropriety. You need to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. And here, the appearance is of impropriety and tends to argue that it in fact took place. And so you're basically already on its face in violation of at least the rules and norms that used to govern emoluments policy here. 2 lawsuits, one by the District of Columbia and the other by Democratic members of Congress, allege that Trump is violating the Emoluments Clause. Trump argues that the ban on emoluments doesn't cover regular business payments. The clause has not previously been the subject of lawsuits, so there are no judicial rulings interpreting what the founders meant when the Constitution was written and ratified more than 230 years ago. All there is 230 years of practice in which people said, I don't even want to approach being accused of something like this. But not Trump. In the Federalist Papers, number 73, published in 1788, one of the Constitution's authors, Alexander Hamilton, wrote that the emoluments ban would ensure that foreign governments, quote, can neither weaken the president's fortitude by operating on his necessities, nor corrupt his integrity by appealing to his avarice. Well, I guess in that sense, there's been an enormous failure here. If the purpose of the Emoluments Clause, whether it covers regular business payments or not, if the purpose is to prevent foreign governments from being able to exert undue influence over the president, either by operating on his necessities or corrupting his integrity by appealing to his avarice, that test is met. That's what they're doing, and it's working. So, end of story. Trump-owned properties, including his D.C. hotel and his Mar-a-Lago golf club, Mar-a-Lago isn't a golf club, but okay, have been the frequent recipients of foreign money. According to news accounts and other public records, at least 9 foreign governments were involved in hosting events at a Trump property. And, of course, many of them have money to burn, like Afghanistan, but also Cyprus, Ireland, Japan, Philippines, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey. Ireland, really? I guess so. I guess how interesting. He didn't want to spend money at his Trump golf club in Ireland, but I don't know. Maybe it was a predecessor regime. At least 9 foreign governments rented or purchased property in buildings or communities owned by Trump businesses. That would be Kuwait, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Notice the theme here. China, Malaysia. That's thematic as well. Slovakia, Thailand, India, and the European Union, which Trump hates. Or something, or sometimes Putin tells him to hate it. Representatives of at least 5 foreign governments, Georgia, Nigeria, Malaysia, Romania, and Saudi Arabia, have stayed at a Trump property. Foreign governments have improved infrastructure in a way that benefited Trump properties in Indonesia and Panama. And at least 8 foreign governments or their representatives attended parties or gatherings at Trump parties. Brazil, Dominica, Georgia, Nigeria, Russia, Turkey, Malaysia, and Qatar. That seems to be, I guess that's listed last because it's the weakest link. An event at the Trump International Hotel in Washington last May exemplifies the risk of a conflict of interest or the risk of an appearance, of such a conflict. Let's hear about that. A delegation from the Mediterranean island nation of Cyprus hosted a Justice for Cyprus conference at the hotel. The group opposes Turkish influence in a breakaway region of Cyprus once occupied by the Turkish military. The purpose of the gathering, as first reported by journalist Zach Everson, was described in a report in the Cyprus News Agency, which gets funding from the government. The group was examining ways of exerting influence on U.S. President Donald Trump with a view to avert the Islamization of the Turkish-occupied part of Cyprus, the report said. In February, the investigative reporting site ProPublica observed that Nigerian presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar and his entourage were staying at the Trump Hotel in Washington, despite Abubakar reportedly having been barred from the U.S., for his alleged involvement in corruption while he was Nigeria's vice president. And last week, the Washington Post reported that a wealthy Iraqi sheikh who was, do they say sheikh now? Or is that how we should be pronouncing this thing? I don't know. Who was trying to influence the Trump administration, spent 26 nights in a suite at the hotel at an estimated cost of tens of thousands of dollars. In a court ruling last year denying Trump's motion to dismiss an emoluments lawsuit, a federal judge in Washington, Peter Messit, raised the seminal question: when a president maintains a premier hotel property that generates millions of dollars a year in profits, how likely is it that he will not be swayed, whether consciously or subconsciously, in any and all of his dealings with foreign or domestic governments that might choose to spend large sums of money at that hotel property? That is a question, isn't it? Trump has appealed the ruling, arguing he should be immune from such claims. A panel of appeals court judges heard arguments in March. So it's about time, guys. When are we going to get a decision on that from the appeals court? That, I think, is an interesting question all by itself. All right. So just so that's on the record, once again, putting emoluments in front of us and reminding us of that continuing problem. I want to switch back to something that's been looming for a little while that we haven't discussed of late. And NBC News apparently had a big role in reporting on that one, too, and Ken Delanian behind that one as well. But I'll take instead the opportunity to read the Daily Kos coverage of that story from Mark Sumner from back on, I guess, almost a week ago, Thursday the 6th. Russia's social media campaign, what we're talking about here, was far larger and vastly more effective than previously reported. And I think, the formulation of that headline a lot better. It was a very awkward NBC News headline on that one, I think. All right. If I recall it correctly. The social media efforts, Mark writes, directed by Russia's quasi-military Internet Research Agency, both reached more people and had a larger impact than previously reported, according to a new report from cybersecurity firm Symantec. Just one account on Twitter received over 6 million retweets, with less than 0.04% of those retweets coming from other Russian accounts. Even before the election, Republicans were out to dismiss the impact of Russia's social media campaign, culminating in Jared Kushner's claim that there was nothing to it but a couple of ads on Facebook. But it's been clear from the beginning that the effort was extensive, targeted, and informed both by the information that the Russians stole from the DNC and by the polling data provided by the Trump campaign. What the Symantec report reveals is a program that was carefully structured, built with confidence and patience, and which worked to send pulses of false information through the social media infrastructure with remarkable effectiveness. It was also one that had a deep understanding of Twitter culture, even starting memes like the hashtag 5 words to ruin a date to build followers and establish connections that could later on be exploited. Very interesting, because you could see people falling into playing that seemingly harmless game and ending up thinking, this is an interesting person to follow, and they follow them, and then they, months later, begin getting fed Russian propaganda by that same person that they had followed for what seemed to be totally innocuous reasons. Back to Mark's write-up of it. To create their digital propaganda tool, Russia put in place core accounts well before the 2016 election cycle. A wise idea, I think, here. That core group was then used to source fresh content, often in the form of mocked-up articles from a fake regional news site or a press release from a fake political organization. But before those accounts were turned on for propaganda purposes, they spent an average of 6 months passing on actual stories or retweeting others to give the accounts a, quote, history that made them appear real to anyone who bothered to check. That's important, right? These base-level accounts themselves were often built as if they represented local papers, radio stations, civic organizations, or other supposedly official sources. When these first-tier sites spoke, a swarm of additional accounts would work to amplify these releases, spreading the news through retweets and automated comments. And for those accounts as well, Russia had a plan. One example of those first-tier Russian accounts would be WTOE5 News, and that's enclosed in scare quotes here. That's the name of the account, I guess, which pretended to be a local television station. Most of the time, it passed along information that was genuine and originated with a real-world news source, except when it didn't. As in July 2016, when it originated the story that Donald Trump had been endorsed by the Pope. You remember that? But the most popular site that they used was 10_GOP, TEN_GOP, which claimed to be the account of the Tennessee Republican Party. I definitely remember these guys. The account was established in 2015 and appears to have had almost entirely original content. It accumulated 150,000 followers and snagged over 6 million retweets from genuine Twitter accounts. That site specialized not only in regular messages of racism and Islamophobia, but in attacking anyone who believed that Russia was trying to sway the election. Not only did some of the messages spread by that account get wide support at the time, those messages, including claiming that President Obama, quote, planted operatives all over the government to leak sensitive information, unquote, are still major talking points expressed by the Republican Party, including Trump. Backing up these accounts were second-tier Russian accounts, constructed mostly under the pretense of being individuals. It was these accounts that spread jokes, started memes, and retweeted popular posts, and in general carried on the business of being, quote, regular people for an extended period. As with fake news accounts, these accounts were primarily driven by bots, but regularly showed hands-on action from Russian operators. By supplementing their work with automation, individuals in the Russian organization could create and sustain a growing tree of accounts that didn't just retweet each other, but extended growing roots throughout Twitter. Several of the accounts, at both levels, were even used to organize actual physical political rallies in the United States, with Russian operatives coming into the country to support these operations. The millions of followers for the social media accounts were targeted with information on these rallies. The regular manual intervention not only injected fresh content, it also meant that systems Twitter put in place to look for accounts that were only retweeting or generating obviously automated messages were fooled by these accounts. Sure, 90% of the content of an account might be retweets with or without an added thread or something like, look at this. But that's also true of many actual accounts. Russia knew that. Much of the messaging wasn't just directed at building up Trump, but at depressing the Democratic vote. That included messages aimed at African American voters and those disappointed in Hillary Clinton's primary victory. Depressing black votes wasn't just a sideline for the Russian effort, it was a primary focus. Those efforts sometimes spanned not just social media, but AM radio and even real-world events. A previous study indicated that black voters were the group most heavily targeted by the Russian effort. It was also an area where the Trump campaign and Russia not only had a common interest, but followed common tactics. Of the 10 most popular Twitter accounts created by Russia, fully half are those that supposedly belong to African American individuals promoting Black Lives Matter or other groups. Each of these accounts had between 500,000 and 1.2 million retweets. Every element of the Symantec report is staggering. It reflected both extensive knowledge, extensive planning, and a hands-on flexibility that shows adaptation and innovation over the course of the campaign. It also shows that in an election that turned on just 100,000 votes across a handful of states, Russia's social media campaign could easily have been a tipping point, especially when helped by incredibly prejudicial actions by James Comey, as mentioned yesterday by Ian, and slanted articles by actual media, and of course I've mentioned every day by Greg Dworkin, I should add. In 2018, Twitter at last released a data set of 3,836 accounts that were used by Russian trolls in 2016, accounts that had put out nearly 10 million tweets and accumulated 6.4 million followers. That data informed Symantec's new report. So I thought a good rundown of the NBC News reporting and the reporting of others, just how sophisticated and how vast the social media campaign on behalf of the Russian trolls really was. And I don't know, so I guess it was being downplayed in some ways since its initial discovery. And as more and more time goes on, I guess more and more interesting revelations and more information about exactly how it worked, including, let's throw this in here just to round out the picture. Again, also from NBC News and Ken Delanian, but this one from, I guess, the day before, and maybe this is the, I actually didn't click on the links in Mark's write-up of it to see where he was drawing his information from. I mean, he definitely went, he borrowed from Symantec itself, but also, let's see, did he use the NBC reporting in all of this? I can't actually tell. No, I mean, I'm sure that their reporting informed his write-up of it, but he didn't seem to link to any of those. But here's Ken Delanian's piece from the day before, June 5th, and their headline hints at something slightly different. It doesn't appear to have made Mark's coverage. Russian trolls who interfered in the 2016 U.S. election also made ad money, the report says. Some accounts were set up months in advance, that much we learned, and some trolls used fake accounts to make money, researchers found. So not only did they influence the outcome of the election, but they might have made some spare cash along the way just to add insult to injury. The effort by a Russian internet deception factory, as Delanian puts it, to manipulate American public opinion during the 2016 election was better planned and executed, and also more lucrative than previously understood, according to a new analysis of nearly 10 million tweets by a leading cybersecurity firm. I guess that would be Symantec. The operation by the St. Petersburg-based internet research agency amounted to a vast coordinated campaign that was incredibly successful at pushing out and amplifying its messages, according to Symantec, which conducted an in-depth analysis of nearly 4,000 Twitter accounts involved in what U.S. intelligence agencies assess was a Russian government-sponsored propaganda operation designed in part to help Donald Trump get elected president. Okay, we learned about the accounts having been set up months in advance to sort of throw people off the scent, but what about this money-making situation? While this propaganda campaign has often been referred to as the work of trolls, the release of the dataset makes it obvious that it was far more than that. Symantec researcher Gillian Cleary wrote in a blog post calling it, quote, a vast disinformation network. Oh my goodness, almost like a vast right-wing conspiracy. The sheer scale and impact of this propaganda campaign is obviously of deep concern to voters in all countries who may fear a repeat of what happened in the lead up to the U.S. presidential election in 2016. The IRA's disinformation campaign was described in the final report by Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and in his indictment of multiple Russian nationals, U.S. intelligence agencies assessed that the social media manipulation was part of a Russian intelligence operation designed to undermine American democracy by exacerbating divisions. We've discussed the sophistication of that, to hurt Hillary Clinton and to help Trump. Experts say the U.S. government and American social media companies have yet to develop a strategy to prevent such manipulation from happening again. Just last week, a different cybersecurity firm exposed an Iranian effort to manipulate U.S. social media with fake accounts. The IRA's basic strategy, Symantec found, was to use a small core of Twitter accounts to push out new content, and they harnessed a wider pool of automated accounts to amplify those messages. All right, so we know the basics of it. The operation was carefully planned, with accounts often registered months before they were used, well in advance of the election. The average time between creation and first tweet, interestingly, was 177 days. So they did bide their time. The core group of main accounts consisted of mainly fake news sources masquerading as regional news outlets, as Mark described. Most had at least 10,000 followers, but followed substantially fewer accounts. They're mainly used to publish new tweets. They posed as local news outlets such as New Orleans Online, El Paso Top News, and San Jose Daily. This would fool most, average onlookers, I guess. The majority of these accounts were created between May and August of 2014, but lay dormant until January of 2015, when most of them started tweeting. Bit of a War of the Worlds feel to it on that one. Let's see. Much larger pool of auxiliary accounts was used to amplify those messages. Auxiliary accounts had fewer followers, but often followed more accounts than the others. The main purpose was to retweet messages from the other accounts, although they were used to occasionally publish original tweets as well. Symantec identified 123 main accounts and 3,713 auxiliary accounts with the data set provided by Twitter. The propaganda was evenly split in its efforts to aim at the extremes of both sides of the liberal-conservative political divide, the researchers found. Among the majority of accounts that were automated, many would frequently show signs of human intervention. We learned about that, too. I'm interested in getting to the profitability of it, if I can skim down and find that one out. They also spend a considerable amount of time on the 10 GOP thing. And by the way, that was an extraordinarily influential one. And I think they mention in here that not only did they get lots and lots of retweets, but they got lots of retweets from 10 GOP in particular, from prominent people inside the Trump campaign. So let's see. There's an editor's note here down towards the middle here. The Symantec report initially said that one of the Russian troll accounts could have been paid up to $1 million through the use of link shorteners, a technique that pushes ads to those who click on tweets. Craig Silverman, BuzzFeed's media editor and an expert in social media advertising, said in a tweet that the $1 million number was inflated and that Symantec had used an incorrect formula to calculate it. In response, Symantec removed the $1 million figure while we investigate some additional data, a spokeswoman told NBC News. This does not change any of the other findings of our research. NBC News has removed references to the $1 million from the story above. That probably explains its absence from Mark's discussion of the situation. But I'd like to see if there's any kind of an update. I mean, did they make less money or did they make no money? I guess would be a pretty important question to try and find the answer to. And maybe that's still upcoming. It's been about a week since those stories broke. And I don't know whether it's back to the drawing board for those guys or whether that part of the story has fallen apart. But I would be very interested in figuring that part of it out. I think it's a minor point, but a very interesting one. And that, I guess, probably would make the idea that the Russians would involve themselves in it that much more believable. If there was actually money to be made, I suppose that's a motivation that more people somehow would be able to understand. Okay, well, we're about out of time here on our program. Up next, of course, Justice Putnam and the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Much to get to later in the week. We still have Thursday and Friday available to us. Thanks to Greg and thanks to Paula for helping us out with the program today. Let's see what Justice has got on tap for you coming up next. Often a good way of checking in with what's happening and what have we missed so far, and to reassure you of the quality of programming coming up next. Let's see. Today, Heritage Foundation head and Attorney General Barr defender John Malcolm didn't like it one bit when confronted with Mueller's obstruction facts, and former federal prosecutor John Flannery exposing Malcolm's own belief in the unitary monarch. Sounds pretty interesting as well. Also, the GOP was forced to end a deeply unpopular recall of a gun safety lawmaker whose son was killed at the Aurora Theater shooting. Wow, they were actually embarrassed by that?
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Yes, here's one that's right up our alley. Trump still hasn't nominated a defense secretary. 173 days after vowing to do so shortly, and I think just yesterday he actually said, I did it already, and he actually hasn't. Amazing that we missed that paperwork story. And the hung jury for the Arizona Good Samaritan facing 20 years for leaving food and water in the desert.